Hello everyone, it's Academic Abby here. Today we will be discussing The Clergyman's Daughter, written by George Orwell. So as the title suggests, The Clergyman's Daughter is a book about a girl named Dorothy, who is the daughter of a rector, which is somebody who works in the church but is allowed to have children. And Dorothy is a very kind, very virtuous girl, and she's motivated by her morality and her religion. However, her father, the rector, is not at all like Dorothy, and so while Dorothy is a very caring girl, the adults in her life, such as her father and her boss at work, are not as caring, which creates some problems. As we already may be seeing, The Clergyman's Daughter includes a lot of concepts that we cover in 10th grade English, such as social responsibility, power, motivation, and appearance versus reality. So the biggest concept is social responsibility, but each time one of these concepts are mentioned, I'll point it out. But to guide our analysis today, I've developed the thesis that adults who falsely perceive reality cannot fulfill their moral obligations, which leaves the children that they're socially responsible for to decide by themselves what is right and wrong. This might make you think, oh, the children will probably follow in their footsteps and also be socially irresponsible. But if these children have strong motivations, they can overcome the challenges that the socially irresponsible adults in their life have left them, and they can still be virtuous people. So we're going to jump right in with the first quote, and I'm going to leave our thesis up right here. So after we analyze each quote, we can tie it back in with the thesis. This first example takes place at a time when Dorothy and her father, they owe a tremendous bill to their local butcher because they've been buying meat but they haven't been paying it. And this is very stressful for Dorothy, and she feels horrible to leave the butcher hanging, and she brings this issue to her father's attention, and he could not care less. He's being very selfish. And so after talking with him, Dorothy states, "There was nothing more to be done with him. He had slipped into an imaginary past in which such vulgar things such as butcher's bills simply did not exist. He seemed to forget that he was only a poverty-stricken rector and not an aristocrat. He lived not uncomfortably in the world of his imagination. It was Dorothy who had to fight the tradesmen and make a leg of mutton last from Sunday to Wednesday." So here we almost see all of the concepts. We definitely see appearance versus reality because the rector is denying his reality. Deep down, he probably does feel some stress and guilt from not paying that butcher's bill, but he doesn't want to acknowledge that. So instead, he's just denying everything and pretending there's no problems at all. He's pretending that he's an aristocrat in his imaginary golden past, even though he's not in the past, he's in the present. And because he is denying reality, he's also being socially irresponsible, because denying reality allows him to be selfish and careless, which is not fair to the butcher, and it's also not fair to Dorothy, who is so stressed out about this butcher's bill. So because of all this, we also see power, because the rector is having all this power in this situation. He is deciding when to pay the bill, and that affects Dorothy and the butcher. This ties back into our thesis, because the rector, being socially irresponsible, could send Dorothy a message that it's okay to be selfish and not pay your bills. However, we're going to see this a little bit more in the next quote, but even it's touched upon here, as Dorothy says, it was Dorothy who had to fight the tradesmen and make a leg of mutton last from Sunday to Wednesday. So she's already trying to be responsible, and her bringing the butcher's bill to her father's attention shows that she does care, and she is upset about not paying the bill. So already Dorothy is having those motivations to continue to be socially responsible, even if her father is not. So now we're going to move on to our second example, which continues off of Dorothy's stress with the butcher bill. And this is after she's talked with her dad, and she's going into town, and she's trying to figure out how she's going to pay this bill. It says here, "The rector, gazing into the middle distance amid comfortable wreaths of smoke, did not hear her. Dorothy went out of the room distressed almost to the point of tears. 39 further days with only £3, 19 and 4 pence to provide for them loomed up in Dorothy's imagination, sending them through a wave of self-pity, which she checked almost instantly. Now then, Dorothy, no sniveling, please. It all comes right somehow if you trust in God. So this quote is very important. Again, it starts off showing that social irresponsibility of the rector. The rector does not care at all how Dorothy is stressed. He's smoking his cigar, and he's just comfortable. He doesn't care that Dorothy is stressed. He's being very selfish. And here is where we see that Dorothy is not at all like the rector. Despite him being selfish, her being stressed to the point of tears shows how she still has her morals. She still feels compassion, and she's worried about the butcher, which is why she's so stressed. She doesn't want him to have to go without eating. And here she is trying to think about all of it, and then she catches herself kind of in that self-pity, she calls it, and she checks herself instantly, and then says words of encouragement from the Bible that it all comes right somehow if you trust in God. So Dorothy is being socially responsible because she's caring about the butcher, and rather than letting herself just wallow in self-pity because that might feel better, she's instead lifting herself up out of these challenges and deciding, okay, I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to find a solution. So Dorothy does have power in this situation because she's choosing to not follow her father's footsteps, but rather be kind. And this is a result of her motivations, which we can already start to kind of see here is her motivation is God and the church. But we're going to get a little bit more into that in the next quote. This next quote takes place one day in church when Dorothy is praying during Mass, and all of a sudden she loses her focus and she cannot say any of her prayers, and she's starting to get really worried, and finally she regains her focus and she says this. The flash of living color had brought back to her a process deeper than reason, her peace of mind, her love of God, her power to worship. Somehow, because of the greenness of the leaves, it was again possible to pray. O all ye green things upon the earth, praise ye the Lord. She began to pray ardently, joyfully, thankfully. So this shows how much Dorothy values God. She wasn't able to pray, but then upon looking at the greenness of the leaves and the purity of nature all over earth, she is again focusing on God, and she's calm again. So that shows not only how much Dorothy trusts in God, but also that God is able to calm her. You know, she was all over the place and unable to focus, but when she began to think of God and all that he had blessed her with, she was able to pull herself back in, and God was able to motivate her to focus again, and she's so joyful and thankful. So this quote is important because it shows that Dorothy's motivations give her the power to act how she wishes. She wanted to focus again, and she was able to do that through God. So this is important later because it's also God that gives Dorothy the power to be socially responsible, despite the fact that the adults in her life are not socially responsible. So we really see this applied in the last example, which takes place when Dorothy is being a teaching assistant in London, and her boss is, again, like Dorothy's dad, not socially responsible. She wants the kids to not really learn that much, and she's trying to teach them just like penmanship and basic reading. So this bothers Dorothy, and Dorothy wants to teach them more than just that. But it's hard because they don't know that much. So she explains here. So she did what she could in her own words and with her own inadequate knowledge, striving all the while to drive into their dull little minds some picture of the past, and what was always more difficult, some interest in it. Mrs. Creevy, who is the teacher, watched Dorothy's innovations with a jealous eye. She was not going to show it, of course, but she was secretly amazed and delighted to find that Dorothy was willing to work. So here we really see Dorothy's motivations allowing her to be socially responsible because she is motivated by the church and God. She is always going to strive to do what is right, regardless if others are trying to make her do what's wrong. So here striving to drive into their dull little minds some information, and she's trying to make it interesting for them. So that is Dorothy's way of being socially responsible and trying to ensure that these students are getting the best education that they can. And here where it says, with her own inadequate knowledge, that touches upon the fact, like, Dorothy doesn't even know these many things, but she's still trying her best to educate the kids. But it also connects back to our thesis. Like I mentioned before, people might think that Dorothy would follow in her father's footsteps because that's all she knows is being difficult and selfish. Yet she doesn't do this, and that's because of that motivation that we talked about before, which gives her the power to be socially responsible, even though those around her are not. We even see here Mrs. Creevy is watching Dorothy jealously, and she won't actually admit to Dorothy that she's proud of her. That's being socially irresponsible, because rather than supporting the people around her, Mrs. Creevy is self-centered and trying to think about how she can best benefit from the situation rather than how everybody can benefit. Ultimately, I'd like to think that it all connects back to appearance versus reality. Because at first appearance, like I have mentioned, we could assume Dorothy would be socially irresponsible. But she is not. In reality, she is very socially responsible and very morally virtuous and kind. And that is because of the power given to her by God. Because of her motivations and what her motivations drive her to do. This can teach us that regardless of the situation we're in and regardless of what the people around us are doing, it's important to stay true to what we really believe and that we allow our own motivations to drive our actions rather than the thoughts and ideas of others. Always stay true to yourself. That's all I have today for you guys on Academic Abby. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you comment in the comments below your opinions on the clergyman's daughter and Dorothy and Mrs. Cleavy and the rector, I'll comment back to you guys. If you ever need any help on English, math, science, social studies, any of those, comment in the comments below. I have some other educational videos. I'll put the link right there. But yes, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.